Well, despite the fact that I'm a weep at heart, it should not come with a surprise that I love Lord of the Rings. I mean, who doesn't? I love the movies, the books, I absolutely adore the insane 6-hour-long board game that is War of the Ring, and of course the games as well. Now, today's state of media based on Tolkien's work is well, that landscape, well, to put it mildly, it makes Mordor seem like a great holiday destination for you and your family. And this insane, disgusting corporate greed that created this landscape makes Sauron look like a swell guy you want to have a beer with. But before we reach this dystopian era, we had the golden age of Lord of the Rings games. First thing that comes to mind is Lord of the Rings Battlefront Middle-earth 1 and 2. Yes, an era where a good game spawned a sequel that was equally as good and even better. And speaking of strange eras, how about movie games being actually good? Like Lord of the Rings Return of the King, the video game. Or how about Lord of the Rings Conquest? To be fair, that was just Star Wars Battlefront with a Lord of the Rings skin, which, well, that was it. And the reskin games didn't stop there, as we got a Final Fantasy clone with Lord of the Rings Third Age. All in all, it was just a beautiful era for Lord of the Rings games, and if you compare it to today's offering, it almost instantly makes you want to do a Denethor. But again, recent years, not so good era for Lord of the Rings games. Yet, there was one game released in recent years that actually sounded interesting. And better yet, it actually promised an interesting new aspect to explore in Tolkien's work, rather than being a copy of a watered-down version of what came before. That is what Lord of the Rings Return to Moria promises, a game with a simple, direct, interesting premise. We are returning to Moria, exploring the abandoned city of the dwarves and uncover its secrets. A premise that, truthfully, fulfills a wish that I had as a kid for so long, and if it only captures a small portion of the exploration feeling Moria gave in the movie, then surely we are in for a treat here. So without further ado, fingers crossed, and let's see if we really get this treat, and what Lord of the Rings Return to Moria has to offer. Lord of the Rings Return to Moria opens with a very familiar voice narrating that Middle-earth is now in the Fourth Age. The War of the Ring is over, there is peace. Yet, despite it being an age of peace, the dwarves still feel very disconnected and not whole as a race. But Gimli plans to change that. He calls on all the dwarves from all the corners of Middle-earth to unite and take back Moria, their ancient lost home. One of these dwarves who heed the call is of course you. But on arriving, the doors to Moria seemed locked and are not opening whatever people try to do. Therefore, there has to be tunneled from the outside to get in. However, during this excavation, an incident occurs trapping you inside the mines of Moria. As you try to find your way back to the door, you discover that despite the mines have been abandoned for years and its old evil resident has been moved out, a new one took its place. It's now up to you to uncover who and what this new evil is while exploring the ancient halls of your ancestors. Lord of the Rings Return to Moria captures exactly what you would expect of this title. Survival and exploration of a very lore-rich location of Middle-earth. And in my opinion, it's the best and most interesting location in Middle-earth to set a game like this. And that opinion grew very strong very quickly after the initial start of the game, because the settings seem to carry a lot more weight than the story itself. Doesn't take away from the fact that the start is very exciting and every Lord of the Rings fan will probably enjoy it very much. We get some glimpse of Middle-earth after the War of the Ring and see how and what the dwarves have been doing after that event. Locations even get referenced that we are very familiar with, which tie up all the other media we know of Tolkien's work very nicely together. But after that start, this excitement soon starts to fade as you are left alone and remain like that until the very end. If you're not playing together with friends, you rarely see a friendly living soul that you share a moment with, or dialogue, or develop a character or story. Now, that does not mean that the story is completely voided from dialogue, but most of the dialogue that is said or sang is done by your own character. Therefore, you are more or less your own story developer and quest giver. But the quests you give yourself is just not that interesting. Each time there is progression, your character will have a monologue with themselves and basically end with, "Let's move forward to the next location," And to do this, you have to collect and mine all the resources in the newest region you have unlocked, then craft tools with them to reach the next area, and then have to do it all over again, because once you reach the newest area, your character will do the same monologue again. This is a very typical design for story of a survival crafting game, and in my opinion, it does match the setting. But matching does not mean it's a very interesting type of story design to follow. In fact, often this story format forms more of a limitation than it adds anything, and here in Return to Moria, that is definitely the case. Again, the setting is great and the game manages so well to capture not just the scale, but the history and atmosphere that you should expect from Moria. It's dark and quiet for most of the time, which is already a tense situation to get into. But when there's light or sound, this tension is not taken away. Because you never truly feel safe, as you never know what is lurking in the deep or in the shadows. Yet despite that, you always want to progress, push forward and see more. Explore and uncover these amazing locations of this lost underground kingdom. Because seeing these locations just takes away your breath every single time. They are just so cool and it is so immersive that you as a dwarf get to see these places and how great they used to be. The game just nails exploration on all its fronts, and it's almost addictive to the point that whenever the game demanded of me to grind for resources and craft necessary tools, it created a reaction out of me that was along the lines of, "Cause I don't want to mine, I want to explore." But the game actively stops me from doing so, which really muddied the experience in my opinion. And to make matters even worse, for a crafting survival game, this game seems to be very hesitant to go all in or commit on its crafting and survival elements. When it comes to the survival aspect in this game, it's just very bare bone, with just a stamina bar, which you can recover by sleeping, and a food bar, which you obviously can recover by eating. That's pretty much it, and while on the crafting side there's more to talk about, it's still not a lot either. To explore the mine you require resources, but also a base where you can relax, eat to recover stamina, stock up on resources, craft and repair gear, and occasionally defend yourself. In Return to Moria you can build your own base from scratch, or better yet, restore ruins in the mine and claim them as your own. The latter one of course being the more interesting one. What is cooler than exploring an ancient lost kingdom? Well, to me, restoring one. And on that aspect the game does its best to give you the tools needed to do so. There is however some imbalance and limits that new players might need to get used to or understand. Whenever you are exploring and find a spot that you think is perfect for your base, you first place a hearth, which literally will form the heart of your base. It allows you to build workbenches, walls, furniture and cosmetic items in this designated space around it. If you are more ambitious or need more room for your base, you can expand the designated space by placing a higher tier hearth or connect other hearth with it by building more of them nearby the hearth boundaries. The rest of the building mechanics is very similar to other crafting survival games, and if that is a genre you play often, then you will not see anything new here. Building requires not a lot of skill as it uses a grid and snapping system, making building very easy and efficient. The buildings block themselves do look cool and there is a decent amount to pick from, giving you some creative control on how you want your base to look. There is one big quality of life aspect in this building system that I wish other crafting survival games would take note of. Whenever you access a crafting station, when being in range of a hearth, all resources in chests and pallets are available then and there, meaning you don't have to crawl through many chests or set up a large storage system to find your resources, nor do you have to drag them around constantly. Though the hearth system comes with its flaws as well, mainly that you are limited to the areas you can build in and how building itself is a role in this game. I know the game is called Return to Moria, but having a bigger options to restore it would have been great. Not just for looks and customization, but reclaiming parts of Moria and restoring it would give a sense of progression. After traversing through the map, the next logical step would be to restore buildings, bridges and gates, or at least things to make traveling back to your base easier or create safer routes to travel on. Instead we got teleport stones, which with a bit of exploitation can just be plopped down anywhere whenever you want and just teleport you back to the base when needed, completely removing the need to return to older areas on the map or manage resources to make things easier later in the future. But to my knowledge, it is actually possible to just drop hearts all over the place and to a degree build as creative as possible with the building blocks and limits that is given. Yet then comes another issue into play. Almost all resources are limited, and while you are not running out of rock anytime soon in something like the mines of Moria, the other resources eventually will dry up. There is a solution to that which I am a bit on the fence about. The characters you create and the inventory they have can be transferred between worlds very easily. This can in certain cases be very helpful. Even I noticed that when I had a friend tag along, that he can just use his own equipment whenever he dropped in and went back to his own world. But in most cases, this switching between worlds is used by the community to farm resources in one world and then bring them back to their main world. Which I ask, why is that? Why can't there be a place or rooms where resources are endless? Or respawn as walls collapse or something happens from time to time? Or just give me buildings I can build or restore in the mine that over time give me certain resources. There were many solutions I can think of for this problem, but it seems like nothing like this has been considered by the devs. And it seems like they have settled with the idea that players just hop worlds and suck them dry for all the resources and then hop back to their own. Another big problem in this game are raids. Your hearths can be raided by orcs, goblins, even foul beasts. Now at the release of this game, raids were actually a reason I dropped the game and gave up on reviewing it. My early base got raided, I got ganked 4 times in a row, the whole base was destroyed and I couldn't be bothered to pick up the pieces or restart. These days the game offers some sliders to tune your experience in what happens in it, and one of them is how often raids can happen. But it also covers other aspects of combat. This is great. I love that I can put the slider too low, but I would have loved to just completely set it off. Even when raids are rare, it still happens that after a long session of exploring, mining, gathering and fighting, I came back to my base just to get raided. And that is just something I really didn't want at that point, especially because the combat itself is just very dull and unintelligent. Between exploring, gathering and surviving, the game tries to spice things up by making you fight the evil creatures that have been living in Moria ever since the dwarves have left. But the combat lacks any interesting form or shape. It's more or less just there, and as long as you have the appropriate gear, you just have to hit things till they die. And when you are in a group, you gotta group up and hit things till they die. The best aspect that the combat offers is that it actually doesn't have a leveling or skill tree. The strength in the combat is based purely on your gear's stats. Now yes, that does mean that in new areas things are very rough at the start. Your enemies outclass you with their weapons and gear, while your gear barely does any damage to them, making each combat encounter a long grind. But once you have the necessary gear to overcome this hurdle, the combat doesn't get interesting either. In the end, it's still blocking and hit things till they die. Only during raids, things seem to be made a little bit more interesting. The enemies that are spawned are trying to get to your hearth and destroy it, so you gotta build some defenses to protect it. I mean, that sounds cool, right? Maybe make some traps, build proper defensive walls, and a layout of your base to make things easier during a raid. But nah, all you need is a door, maybe 2, and then just hit the enemies in a group, as after the moment they are spawned, they just steamroll towards your hearth, and whatever is in between them, they will just try to destroy that first, before they try to kill you or do anything else. Whenever this game forced me to indulge myself into combat, I truly wondered, why is it here? Even for the story, the combat doesn't really matter or is required. And it's not really fun or excited to do. It tries to spice up the gameplay, but instead it just forms another blockade in exploring the underground kingdom that is Moria. All in all, Lord of the Rings Return to Moria is simply put, a dream come true. When it comes to its setting, presentation and overall respect to its source material. As a kid, I always wanted to explore Moria beyond the movies and the books. Especially in a game format, it always seemed to be perfect. Yet whenever in recent years Lord of the Rings games would show up, they usually were the world is at stake, it all matters now type of story, or worse, blatantly chases after the movies themselves. But of course, both never really worked for games like that, because, well, we all know who is going to beat Sauron, and it's not us in those games, despite them wanting us to think we are going to. Thankfully, Return to Moria completely avoids all of this, as it solely focuses on Moria, the dwarves themselves, their legacy and history. And it does it really well, making exploring Moria such a thrilling, immersive and overall great experience. It's therefore very unfortunate that its crafting and survival elements can and will get in the way of that experience from time to time, forcing you in sessions of resource grinding and crafting. Now, it offers a lot of things in terms of building, but it doesn't nail the sense of rebuilding, nor does it play an essential role in enhancing your exploration, resource management, or even survival for that matter. It offers enough to do the trick as a crafting survival game, but it does not excel at it. It's just too basic and almost cookie cutter compared to other survival crafting games. And the way things are designed surrounding your hearts limits you in every possible way in creativity and fun. But in the end, in building, crafting and survival is still some fun to be found. Even very relaxing at times, especially base building. But when it comes to the combat, it feels just like a boring, mundane, mandatory thing you have to buy through from time to time. And the main question is, in those moments, is it worth it? Well, yes, very much worth it. It's so worth your time. I sometimes argued in my reviews that the setting made the game worthwhile, and that applies here very much. In fact, I would say this game embodies the idea that the setting can make the game worthwhile no matter what else it throws at you. And on this aspect, I would recommend this game. If you love Lord of the Rings and always wanted to see more of Moria and explore it, then I recommend buying this game. Though chances are you already did. And if certain aspects don't sound as interesting or fun to you, you can always consider having friends joining you, making even the more mundane parts of the game a little bit more fun. It's a little bit harder to recommend this game if you wish, like me, to rebuild or creative build in this game. I know there's a community that does actually do creative builds in it, and I would say it's possible to build some really cool things. But before stepping in, maybe check what is possible and what the limits are. But unfortunately, I can't recommend this game to fans of the crafting survival genre. There are much better games out there that does the genre more justice, and I would say your time is better spent there than it is here.